Welcome back to Be Productive. I'm your host, Clara Capano. And our next segment, wow, do we have a treat for you? We are bringing in Greg Schaefer, who is a cybersecurity expert. Greg, welcome to the show.
Thank you for
You know,
having me.
you bet. You are one of our new contributors, and I am so excited to have you here. You have a passion for helping small business owners really be able to assess risk in their business and also plan for those items. So I'm really excited, and we're just going to dive right in. So, when we talk about security risk assessment, what are some of the key components that people need to pay attention to?
So one of the things with small and mid-sized businesses is that they don't have the expertise that come with larger businesses, which is why you have the virtual CISO environment. We share our risk management experience with those sorts of businesses on a fractional basis. And really the core of everything information security related is that information security is risk management. So we start there. And one of the most important parts of that is the information security risk assessment. Now, it sounds like that it's a big deal, but really it's just a um, representation, if you will, of a subject matter's expert's opinion. So, for example, I can go to you and I can say, well, you not having multi-factor authentication, that's a high risk. You not having encryption, that's a high risk. Well, what does that really mean? And how does that actually work with other risks within the organization? So an information security risk assessment helps to identify and prioritize risks so that then they can be worked on. So in order to do that, it has to have several important components. You have to have a listing of your assets because you want to assess risk according to your assets against your assets. And that can be not just your computers and servers, but it can be information. You want to assess risks against your policies and procedures because that's one of the places where certainly there can be significant risk. And when I say assess risk, we usually, in what we call a qualitative risk assessment, we look at a couple of things. We look at what we say likelihood and impact. So, what is the chance of something happening, something bad? And then, if that thing bad does happen, what's the impact to the organization? And you take those two figures. A lot of times, it's very simple calculation. You say low, medium, and high. You assign it a number. It's not quantitative risk management, but it's qualitative. You assign a number, you multiply it together. So that might be if you do a 1, 2, 3 scale, you have a 9.
Mhm.
Then you look at controls that are in place to lower the risk. So you might have something to help protect an organization. Like you might have, okay, here's some information on a server somewhere. Well, that's a high risk, but we have a firewall in place. That control lowers the risk. That lowers it to what we call a residual risk. And then once you have your residual risk, you match that against your what you would call risk tolerance of the company, and then you decide what you're going to do with it.
This is so important because I think this is something that can be a little overwhelming and scary for small business owners and leaders. And many times they think, oh, unless only this is only out there for large organizations. And I love how you're bringing this down to just, the smaller organization. And when we're looking at these, how does having this risk management system, how is this going to help the overall performance of an organization?
So one of the goals of an information security officer, chief information security officer in a large organization is that they exist to let the board of directors and the C-suite have enough information so they can make risk-informed decisions as far as the threat goes. So my job with smaller businesses is to convey that risk some way, shape, or form. The risk assessment does that. Now, it does no good if I just present a spreadsheet and, hey, here you go. I have to explain it. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to talk in the language of the business to be able to get them to understand that um, there's there can be certain business impacts if we do not address some of these risks because they really don't want to know. When I talk about risks, they don't want to know, for example, how many threats were blocked by the firewall. Those sorts of things are meaningless to them, but they want to know how can this impact the bottom line. So I think that the most important thing of a risk assessment, and I will say that this is the most important tool that a chief information security officer or a virtual chief information security officer has, is that it is the tool for identifying and conveying that risk to the organization, to the C-suite and the board of directors. If
Yeah.
you have a board of directors, sometimes small businesses, maybe not.
True. And I think you're hitting on something really key here, which is all about, again, we get the information, but now we have to communicate it.
Mhm.
So, what are some of the common challenges that you are finding in being able to communicate what you find to the executive level?
Well, it's not exactly the most interesting subject to begin with. A lot of times, small businesses in particular, they're really focused on getting product out the door or developing service. They're sometimes running on very low margins. And anything about information security and cybersecurity, they're basically thinking, well, I really don't want to think about it. So just the challenge of getting the awareness in there that no, this can be something that can really it could kill your organization basically. But then you don't want to go the other way and be what we sometimes refer to as the office of no. It isn't as if we're trying to say no, you can't do something, no, you can't. We understand as security executives that the whole goal is to enable you, the business leaders, to do what you need to do for the business, but to do it as low risk as possible. So
Mhm.
that starts by explaining the process and explaining the scope of how we're doing things, explaining how we're assessing the risk, why it's important to look at the risk and mitigate it, and also ensure that they realize we're not going to come to you asking for a whole bunch of money because that's always a bad thing. If you go to your CFO in an organization and say, I need $50,000 to fix this problem without explaining items first, it's going to be a hard sell. But
Mhm.
also, most likely, most often than not, most of the time, risks can be mitigated somewhat, if not completely, to the point of what we call risk tolerance, simply by changing processes. A lot of times you don't even have to um, really deal with any sort of external purchase, any sort of capex or opex or anything like that. You're just taking care of it by changing processes. But it begins again with we don't expect the business leaders to understand and be completely fluent in cybersecurity terms. We have to be completely fluent in business terms and act as the translators.
Right. And I love how you even started this conversation by talking about how you really want to be able to talk in the language of the company and the business, because you're right. We have to be able to get that alignment. And I think it's so important. I find what you're doing extremely fascinating because it's something I have not really delved into, but it's so critical in this day and age. And regardless the size of a company and organization, we have to be aware of these. So I appreciate you sharing these items with us. Now, your company, which is VCISO, services, works on this. You are an expert. You've been doing this for many years. I know that some of the people that are following the show are going to want to reach out to you and learn more. So, where is the best place for people to reach out and connect with you?
Well, probably the best place is to go to the website, vcsoservices.com. You can also reach us by emailing info@vcsoservices.com. Our company is on LinkedIn and on Twitter, as am I as well too. You can always contact me. And we also have a traditional phone if you want to call us that way. Some people like to do that as well too.
Mhm.
But we are pretty responsive within the hour usually, and we'll get back to you during business hours and be happy to help wherever we can.
Beautiful. Well, Greg, thank you so much. I can't wait to get you on the show more. And for all of you watching, make sure you are doing these assessments. You put so much effort, so much passion into what you do each and every day. Let's make sure we are doing it with purpose. Let's look at the strategies and let's make sure that we are going to be protected and our clients are going to be protected. So, thanks for being here. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with more Be Productive.